everyone, and welcome. I'll go ahead and start talking as people join at the top of the hour. Welcome to Creating Data Management Plans with DMPTool. My name is Justin Dela Cruz, and this is hosted by the National Center for Data Services. The link to the NCDS is in the chat if you'd like to check out what we do, which is webinars, class offerings, online resources. We have a link to our blog there where you can get updates. And I'll go ahead and introduce Betsy to go ahead and get started with this presentation. This is something that she's helped us out with before. It was a very good session on using the DMP tool, and so we wanted to invite her back to give another presentation. And if you have comments or questions, I'll be looking at the chat, and we may have some time near the end to address some of the questions there. So feel free to put those in the chat. And I'll let Betsy, you can introduce yourself and I'll go on mute. Thank you.
Yes, I've absolutely designed this presentation so it won't take a full hour, and I'm hoping we have plenty of questions. And just for the presentation, I'm going to turn my video off because I find it distracting. Okay, so my name is Betsy Gunia. I work as a research data management consultant at Johns Hopkins University. And my experience with the DMP tool is really twofold. At Johns Hopkins, we've been encouraging our researchers to use the DMP tool to write their data management plans across various funders for probably about 8 years at this point. And then once they draft their plans, we use the DMP tool to provide feedback to them. The second hat that I wear for the DMP tool is I recently joined their editorial board. So this is a group of people in the research data community that help make sure that the DMP tool is up to date and make sure that, you know, if there's a funder out there that has a new data management or sharing requirement, it's incorporated within the DMP tool. So the editorial board just makes sure that the DMP tool serves the function, it serves the utility of the research community. Today's presentation is mostly focused on the capabilities of the DMP tool to help researchers write their data management and sharing plans. But before I go into the application itself, I think it's important to just cover briefly, you know, why data management and sharing are important. You know, in other words, why do so many funders require that researchers submit a data management and sharing plan at the proposal stage, you know, before any research has ever been collected? I will also briefly go over like the main components of a data management and sharing plan. I'm going to be using NIH as an example, just given the audience, but I want to stress that the DMP tool can be used for any funder. So it's not just something that's specific to the National Institutes of Health. The heart of today's presentation, though, will be doing a live demo of the key DMP tool features. And hopefully, if you're not already using the DMP tool at your place of employment, this will encourage you to do so. So let's begin by looking at why data management and sharing are important. And I'm actually going to throw this out to you all, which is if you could, in the chat, maybe list a few reasons why you think it's important. Like, why should we care what scientists do with their data? Why do we want them to be good stewards of their research? If you could put your ideas in the chat, I'd appreciate that. Transparency. Reusable. Yep, replication. Great. Yep, auditable, exactly. Great. Yes, I think you guys have hit the big ones. So I'm kind of listing these reasons from like a perspective of science itself. I mean, there's lots of different stakeholders in data management and sharing, but these are really the principles behind why it's important from a science as a whole. So reproducibility, that's mentioned quite a bit in the chat, which is the ability to take the same data set, go through the same set of analyses, and come up with the same result. It requires the sharing of data, code, analytic methodology, not only sharing, but making sure that everything is well organized and described so everybody can follow your recipe and reproduce your results. It also facilitates data reuse. So when data are well described, follow standards, they're shared, they can possibly be reused, maybe in a way that the original data creator didn't even imagine. And from a funder's perspective, these sort of ideas of reproducibility and data reuse are important because I think it instills a sense of trust from the public in science. And it probably also helps funders know, if everything's kind of open, where should they funnel their money? What types of research has already been done in the past, and what should we use our money for in the future? And finally, good data management helps make data fair. It's probably a term you've heard of. I feel like it's having a moment. It's actually been around. The original article that this is based off of was published in 2016. I actually looked it up for this presentation. Couldn't believe how long ago that was. And if you aren't familiar with FAIR, I'll just briefly go through it. There's 4 principles. And it was really developed from this idea of making data machine actionable. So making it so that computational systems can find, access, interoperate, and reuse data with little, or no human intervention. So making your data findable involves things like adding descriptive keywords to your data, ensuring your data has like a persistent identifier, such as a DOI. Accessible refers to making sure that it can be found by both machines, can be accessed, by machines and humans, and making your metadata or documentation publicly available, even if your data itself can't be publicly shared because it needs to be restricted access. To make your data interoperable, it's about using open formats when possible and following metadata standards for your field. And increasing the reusability of your data involves things like attaching a clear license to your data and code and providing good documentation so that other researchers and your future self can make sense of your data. So given all the positives that are reaped by good data stewardship and sharing, you can understand why it is strongly encouraged or required by various funders, publishers, and institutions. So I don't want to go into the specifics of every journal, funder, and home institutional policy at the moment, but the point is that researchers are subject to different policies around this from different stakeholders. So, like my own home institution, Johns Hopkins, has a data retention policy, and basically researchers have to retain data from a publication for 5 years post-publication, and they also have to make sure that they can prove that the data have not been tinkered with. So now that we know that it's important, why it's important to manage and share data, and why so many different stakeholders have policies around it, what exactly is a data management and sharing plan? So in a nutshell, and I'm being very general here, it's a document that describes how research data will be gathered, stored, documented, and shared. And this is sort of general terms across funders. Many funders now ask for one as part of the grant proposal. And in my own job, we've had a few instances where PIs have been asked to revise their data management plan because before they could get awarded because it wasn't weak. It was weak. And I always tell researchers, even if you don't have to write a data management plan, it makes a lot of sense to do so because it just it helps with meeting data sharing policies that you may have from your publisher. And I want to point out that I'm calling these DMPs, and the tool itself is called DMP, but they can also be called a data sharing plan or a data management and sharing plan. Same principles, different name. So I think what's important to get off to state to researchers is, yes, you have all these requirements to write a data management plan, but there are other reasons to do it. So the reasons I gave before on, making data fair, reproducible, those are like high, lofty reasons, ideals to improve science. But at a more granular, basic level, DMPs are useful because they save time at the end of the project. So I always give this story of one of the first graduate students I worked with to archive their data. We run an institutional data repository at Johns Hopkins, and the graduate student that I was working with said, if I had known 3 years ago when I was collecting this data that I would have to share it at the end of this, I would have organized and described my data differently. So this idea that if you plan ahead, it just makes the process of data sharing so much easier. And it helps create documentation for your data. I mean, I would argue that a data management plan in and of itself is a form of documentation. And when you're working with people outside your lab, which that's how most science is done nowadays, having sort of a central document that tells everybody, this is what we're going to do. These are your roles and responsibilities. It's something that everybody can point to and make sure they're on the same page. It's just going to make your whole research process go more smoothly. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the NIH data management and sharing policy at this point. But if you're not as familiar, I'll just briefly talk about it, which is if you are submitting a proposal to NIH and you produce scientific data, you will need to write a data management and sharing plan and submit it as part of your grant. So the plan covers 6 elements related to the stewardship of your data and code, and will be reviewed by an NIH program officer for acceptability. So really the spirit of this policy is to maximize data sharing to the extent possible, and for the data to be of a sufficient quality to validate and replicate research findings. For NIH, which is the example that I'm going to be using in this presentation, they have 6 different what they call elements. These are 6 things that you need to talk about in relationship to your data. And I would say that NIH is fairly representative of other funders. So I wanted to present these because you will see these 6 elements pop up again when we actually go into the DMP tool. All right, so now we're going to go into what I think the most interesting part of this presentation, the DMP tool. So if you aren't familiar with the DMP tool, it is a free tool. It's an online application. It's managed by the California Digital Library, and it's a way, it helps create data management plans. And so I want to stress that it doesn't write a data management plan, but it helps break the process down into smaller chunks that I in a way that I think just makes it less daunting for researchers. And it does this through a click-through wizard. And it has all the requirements by that particular funder in the same template. It's used by many different institutions. I just checked, and there's over 100,000 different users across the world that have created plans within the DMP tool. And it has within it funder-specific templates for both private and public funders. The current community, and when I say community, I'm talking about the research data community. The focus has been on making sure that the DMP tool works with the new NIH data management sharing policy. And in response to that, when I go into the DMP tool, I'm going to point out some of the aspects of the NIH template within the DMP tool that are a little bit different than other funders. So why should people use the DMP tool? These are 4 sort of features of it that I think are really beneficial. I'm going to demonstrate these within the DMP tool itself during the demo, but I wanted to point these out ahead of time. So the first is guidance. Within the DMP tool, you'll have quick links to relevant resources, both things that are like relevant to the actual funder. And if you are part of what is called a participating institution, so these are institutions that have reached out to the DMP tool and said, hey, I want to be a participant so that I can customize my instance of the DMP tool. You can add information that's relevant to your research community. Like for example, we run a data repository. Sometimes people want to deposit into it and they want some language that they can place into their data management plan about our repository. And using the DMP tool, I have inserted that language so that our researchers can quickly grab it as they're writing their plan. Researchers can receive feedback on their draft plan, either from their collaborators, or if your institution is a participating institution, the administrators will get a notification that somebody would like their plan reviewed. You can see examples of public plans that nice scientists have decided that they will let other people view within the DMP tool. And finally, kind of behind the scenes, there's a lot of work going on to make data management plans machine actionable. So this is setting the stage for allowing automated exchange of information about your research. Also, they can be called networked DMP. Some examples, some tangible examples, is that you can get a DOI for your data management plan, and then you can share it with your ORCID profile automatically. There's a lot more along that front as well. A lot of work on machine actionable DMPs. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the application itself, and I'm going to switch screens. Sorry, it's a little bit jarring. Whoops. Okay. Just want to make sure if you all could, or at least one person, say something in the chat about they can see the DMP tool on the screen. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, before I log in, I just want to point out a few things. So this is the home page. And just for your convenience, I will put it in the chat. There's a couple things I want to point out, which is funder requirements up here, public DMPs, and the help. So under funder requirements, you can see a list of all the different funder templates that exist within the DMP tool.
I think we might still be seeing your slide with the picture of the home page.
Oh, okay. Let me rectify that.
That might help.
Hold on. All right. Can you see my mouse moving?
Yes, we see the website now.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I haven't logged in. Just so you know, this is all, you don't have to log in to see any of this. You can see all the different funders that have templates within the DMP tool, and information on, you know, when it was created, the template was created, and links directly to the funder requirements. Okay. Here is where you can see public DMPs. So the caveat is that a researcher chooses to share their plan publicly. These are not vetted by anybody, but I would argue that most people who feel confident in their data management plan, if they didn't feel confident, I'm not sure that they would necessarily share their DMP. So here you can go to find examples of DMPs, and you can search by funder and institution. And one thing I want to point out is that some of these DMPs have this featured attribute, and the featured attribute means that a DMP tool administrator from that university, so in this example, Washington University in St. Louis, their data librarian, I happen to know her, she went through and looked at this plan and decided it was a good plan, and so she made it a featured plan. So if you want to look through public plans, I strongly recommend focusing on the ones that have the word featured next to them. The DMP tool also has this help tab, and it divides its help by what role you're playing: help for researchers, help for administrators, sort of ways, lots of different information you can use for help. Okay, now I'm going to sign in. And because I'm one of these participating institutions, and again, I will say that being a participating institution is completely free. And at the end of this presentation, I will talk to you about how to become a participating institution. But because I am one, I'm Shibboleth enabled. And so I don't need to create a separate account. It just uses my work account. And I'm also on my VPN. But if you've never signed in before, you'll need to create an account, and it's all free. The first thing that you'll see is this dashboard, and this is where you'll find all the plans that you've already created. Now, I'm not a researcher, so the plans that I've created are truly just for educational purposes, for trainings that I give, and I have this box called test checked for all of them. If I was a researcher, this would look a little bit different. And then down here, I can see plans that members of the Johns Hopkins community decided to share with their fellow JHU employees. So again, that's because I'm part of Johns Hopkins. I can see all the plans that researchers have decided to share with other people within Johns Hopkins. They didn't feel comfortable adding them to this public DMP list, but they felt comfortable sharing them within our institution. There are two ways to create a plan. So you've got this button, or this tab, and this button. They work the same way. And you're presented with this first page to create a new plan, and you need to give your research a title. So I'll just call it test to be quick. And because I'm doing this for educational purposes, I'm actually going to click this button. Because I work at Johns Hopkins, my research organization, the default is Johns Hopkins, but I can change that. And because maybe you have collaborators, maybe you're not the PI for the project, and that person is at a different institution, you can change this. And then you begin by trying to find the template for your funding organization. And you can use acronyms or you can type everything out. So I'll use NIH. And within NIH, there are multiple templates. I'll show those to you. So we've got the default, which is the one that's most commonly used. And then we have a new one for the National Institutes of Mental Health. And then we have something called the NIH FDP Pilot Bravo and Alpha. So what I will just say is that these two templates are from a project called the Federal Demonstration Project. And basically NIH is looking at ways to kind of streamline their data management plan. and they have two different versions of this. But the point is that a researcher can use this template, this template, this template, and they're all valid. They've all been, they all adhere to the requirements of NIH. This last one is specific to NIMH. The people who help volunteer to add template information for the DMP tool, we decided that there was enough of a difference with NIMH from the more general requirements for the data management plan that it warranted its own template. For this the purposes of today, I'm just going to do the default. So once you've created a plan, you are presented with some more information that you can optionally fill in. Project abstract is one of these fields that's optional, but when I'm working with researchers, I strongly encourage them to do this because it is so much easier to read and understand a data management plan if I have a little background information. Sometimes when people write plans, you kind of have to piece together what's going on, but when you have a project abstract, it really helps facilitate the ease with which I can provide quality feedback. So if you are somebody who's in a position to promote the DMP tool, I always recommend that you promote this idea of adding a project abstract at this stage. There's other optional pieces of information that you can join. A lot of this has to do with sort of what this machine actionable capabilities of the DMP. So you can kind of go back and forth to the DMP tool after your project's been awarded and update your DMP through time if you need to. The next tab, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one very important thing, which is guidance over here. So the DMP tool allows you to pick guidance from different groups. There's guidance from the funder, so that's the default guidance from whatever funder you have. So here I'll have NIH. There's also guidance created by people who volunteer their time to write it up for the DMP tool, and that's also a default. And if you are a participating institution, your own institution's guidance will be a default. I don't have to use any of these. I can unclick these and I can look at all the different places that have guidance. And you know, if you have a collaborator that's at a different university, you might want to also select their institution's guidance if they have it. In this Collaborators tab, you can add other people that you want to be able to view or edit. So by default, because I am a DMP tool administrator, I have access to everybody's plans, but other than that, you have to give access to people if you want them to view or edit your plan. This next tab is really the heart of the DMP tool, and this is where you write your plan. I want to point out a few things about this interface. It tells you which template you're using, when it was published and so forth. It also has this number tracking, so 0/12, and then it has it after all of these 6 elements, the same 6 elements that I showed you previously. So basically, this is here to track your progress as you're writing your plan. So to start, you'll go down to the first element. And within data type, there are actually like 3 subparts to this question. So NIH asks in the first part, wants you to describe your data. So you would go and fill out this section. I'm just going to be silly, put code and data. NIH would want you to be way more descriptive than that, just to illustrate how the tracking works on here. So you'll see that that number went up to 1 and it went up to 1 here. So it's a nice visual cue that you know you're making progress on your plan and you haven't missed anything. So the DMP tool has the language directly from NIH here. And on the sidebar, it's got guidance directly from NIH. This is language from the policy. You also have tabs for JHU, my own institution, and the DMP tool. So if you're perhaps not fully understanding what NIH is asking of you at this point, you can get some more information over here. There's also a comments section. So this is where collaborators could comment on your plan. Let's see, like, and that'll show up when the next time the person logs into the DMP tool. It's also where I, as a DMP tool administrator, provide feedback to our researchers on their plan. Another thing I want to point out, and this is specific to the NIH template within the DMP tool. Because the new policy was a really a big deal in the research community, the folks at the DMP tool put out a call for assistance with preparing for it. And they were able to accrue a bunch of people that helped write these sort of helper language. So we've got fill in the blank prompts and sample answers. And I will say that these are very helpful. I think it helps researchers if they just need to kind of get started to think about what they want to talk about in this one section. I caution though, and I tell this to researchers all the time, which is just read the language before you paste it. It's really important to not, to make sure that what you write in your data management plan really speaks to your research, because ultimately your plan, it's an agreement between you and NIH, and you want to make sure that you can actually follow through on your plan. So while I think this is incredibly helpful, that's my one little caveat, which is just to make sure that the helper language speaks to your research. So after you've filled out your section, you would go on down to all the other parts of that first element, data type, and save it. And then you would go fill out the other 5 elements. And when you've done that, this should say 12 out of 12. So you know that you're done and you can move on. This next tab is optional, but I highly recommend it. In fact, I wish it was required. I wish all funders required that people do this. I call it a data table, but here it's called a DMP tool calls it a research output. It's the same idea though. It's where you go through and you basically go through your scientific workflow and kind of make line items of all the different parts of your research. So here you can say, I have this data set. I'm not very creative today, so I'm just going to put test. And I am going to say, okay, this particular data type that I'm creating, I'm going to put it in a specific repository. Just going to find my own. Come on. Okay. So this list of repositories, incidentally, is hooked up to something called re3data.org, which is an international catalog of research data repositories. And I can go through and I can add a specific metadata standard. I can provide more information about my data set, what kind of license I want to give it, access level, controlled or open. Just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to do that. But you end up with a table of all the different data sets that you're producing within a project. And here, you would talk about your code, your raw data, your code, your analyzed data, image data, what have you. But again, it's a way to itemize what you're trying to manage and share ultimately. This next tab is called Request Feedback, and it's something you would only see if your institution was a participating institution. So this is the mechanism by which researchers can reach out to you and ask for direct feedback on their plan. So when they come here after they've drafted their plan, they hit this button and I receive a notification saying, so-and-so has requested that you review your plan. So it's it's a really nice feature for tracking what you're working on. And um, I personally find this functionality of the DMP tool incredibly useful. I know some people who don't use the DMP tool, when they're providing feedback on plans, they use email. And I always find that going back and forth on a Word document that's an attachment to email is just recipe for disaster sometimes. So there's many things that are great about the DMP tool, but I really appreciate this functionality where my edits and suggestions everything's within the DMP tool itself. The last two tabs, Finalize and Download, are for the end of your project, the end of your writing your plan, I should say. Here you can set your plan visibility. By default, all plans are private, so only yourself, your collaborators, and administrators at your organization can see your plan. You can make it open to anybody at your organization. Now, I showed that to you earlier on the dashboard where I showed all the people at Johns Hopkins that decided to make their plan open to JHU people. Sometimes people want to make their data management plan public. In order to do so, though, because I didn't take the time to fill everything out, I'm not eligible to do that. I would have had to have written over 50% of the questions need to be answered, and I would not have marked my project as a test or a mock project. You can also register your plan for a DMP ID, so it gives you a DOI. And again, I don't have the capability just because this is a mock project, but it is capability within the DMP tool. Final tab is download. So you can download in various formats. There are different aspects of the plan that you can include within the final product, and you can change the fonts and margins and all that, depending on whatever your particular funder requires. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides. Actually, I'm going to take a moment and see if y'all have anything in the chat. My apologies, I don't use WebEx very often, and or if at all, so I'm trying to orient myself a little bit to it. I'm used to Zoom.
So one thing we can do is kind of read the questions out loud in case people can't see the chat.
Okay.
For the research outputs tab, can you export the table or link it to the plan?
Yes. Right here, you can click if you want to include the table to your research outputs. It is sort of an addendum. It's at the last part of your plan. But most funders that I'm aware of, at least, that's not something that you would necessarily want to upload because it might exceed your page limit for your plan.
And then my institution is a participating institution, but I do not see that request feedback tab. Do you have an idea of why not?
I'm sorry, I don't. I would suggest reaching out to the DMP tool folks. I set this up about 8 years ago, and so I'm trying to think back to remember if did I have to do anything special in order to see the request feedback tab, and I honestly don't think I did. So I'm sorry I can't be more helpful, but that seems like something just email the DMP tool folks, and I bet they'll get back to you very quickly. They're incredibly responsive.
I can see how to remove plans from my list, but I'm not quite sure they are trash and can be deleted. Oh, they responded, that's apparently a checkbox now, how to remove plans from the list and make sure that they're trashed and can be deleted.
You mean plans that you've created in the dashboard?
Oh, no, my reply was about the tips.
Oh, the guidance.
Yeah.
I haven't ever removed anything. I've certainly updated the guidance through the years. I mean, if you want me to go,
Oh,
so
I think the original question was about how to remove plans from the dashboard,
okay.
and
So
to make
usually,
sure that they're trashed
yeah,
out.
I just at least for me, this is how it works. I just remove it. Um, and that's always worked for me. In fact, I kind of tidied this up right before I presented.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, oh, I got a private question. When do you expect the AI development elements might be introduced into the tool?
Well, I don't work for the DMP tool. So I know that's probably not the answer you wanted, but the truth is I honestly, I don't know exactly when. I mean, they're right now, there's, I know behind the scenes, there's lots of interface work that's going on, interface and, back end work that's going on for machine actionability. I know they put out a call, a community call for people to participate in like a pilot project on machine actionable DMPs. So, and that starts in January 2024, and the pilot project ends in December 2024. So I would assume they're using that information from those pilot projects to kind of guide implementation. So if I had to guess, it would probably be a couple years from now.
Okay. If anyone else has a question, feel free to put it in the chat.
Yes, and I'm very sorry for the screen snafu. That's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, it's okay.
Or if anybody is interested in sort of the admin aspects of the DMP tool, because I gave this presentation more from the perspective of how the tool actually works for a researcher. But I'm happy to talk a little bit about that aspect of the admin part. Okay. So for training materials, what I do is I literally create, there's two aspects to training here. Okay, so you can, use a demo. I have plans already in here, and use those to demonstrate how to use the DMP tool. The DMP tool people themselves have created, I know they have created slide deck that you can use. I believe that's actually on one of my other slides. So I have a few more slides that I'll just quickly go through. I just briefly wanted to acknowledge the DMP tool NIH working group. As I mentioned earlier, NIH is the only funder template that actually has this like extra helper sentences. And that's because there were a group of people at these various institutions that got together and developed that. They run a blog. Here's the link. And the latest blog is what I was mentioning before, which is the pilot project to develop scalable data management infrastructure. And here's how to become a participating institution. So it's free. You can customize your guidance. People can request feedback from the DMP tool admin, and sort of a running theme through all of this is that the DMP tool itself evolves based on community needs. And so becoming a participating institution is one way to have a voice in that. All you have to do is email them or use their contact form on their website, and you will become a participating institution. So I think this is the link that I wanted to grab, but oh, there's a series of slides. My screen is blank. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is just, all right. Let me, I'm going to stop sharing.
Stop sharing, yeah, just to
Yep,
restart
yeah.
it. Sometimes it's just a glitch. It happens to me too.
Okay. So this is what I was saying about becoming a participating institution. And I know you'll get a copy of the slides. And then there is a link here on slides that you can use for promoting the DMP tool if you want, and just using it like a free training almost, and some flyers as well. A few references that I've included, and how to be an admin, the blog, and how to contact the DMP tool team. And I think we're already there, and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Okay. I will try to get out of this. I think there were some questions on the admin.
Yeah, there's some interest in seeing the admin sides of things.
I will reshare. We're just going to be safe from here on out and always reshare. So the admin side, there are two different ways to customize the DMP tool guidance. You can do what I've done, which is apply guidance that is applied across all funders. So I'll just kind of show you what I mean. So behind the scenes, for each template that's within the DMP tool, it's tagged with what they call a theme. And so you've got related policies, intellectual property rights, storage and security, and so forth. And what I've done is write text specific to JHU based off that theme. And then the DMP tool applies that to every single funder. So it doesn't matter if it's NIH, NSF, whenever the template talks about related policies, JHU researchers are going to see this text. The other approach to customizing your templates is to create a template, a specific institutional template per funder. So I, in theory, could go and create a JHU specific NIH template, and I would have complete control over the guidance. And I think in some ways it's a great approach if you have the bandwidth to do so. The problem is every time the funder updates their requirements, you have to go back in and update your guidance. So at least for us, we've taken the tact of doing it where our guidance applies across all funders. Any other questions?
Can more than one collaborator work edit in the DMP tool at one time?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I don't know about simultaneously, but yes, multiple people can have access to editing. I don't think we've ever had a time where, at least that I know of, that somebody was doing it, commenting on it or editing it at the same time as somebody else.
Is DMPTool available outside of the United States?
I believe so. Yeah, because I saw right in the beginning when we first created a plan, I had that list of guidance. So I'll just go back to it. Sorry, just bear with me. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I believe I saw some Australian. So anybody can use the DMP tool, but if you look at the list of funders, it's as far as I'm aware, most of it is US centric. But yes, anybody can have an account and be a DMP tool administrator.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.